Take you through a couple of these LS motors that put together, kind of just put together a whole bunch of motors that we pulled apart, showed you pictures of ripping and tearing all these things apart. I hand selected about 5 of them to put together right away because the bores were absolutely beautiful, super low mile motors, and the rest of them are all going to be machined. They're going to need bores, they're going to need pistons, they're going to need a bunch more work. These are my super low mileage, hand selected, picked motors from the best of the best. This is a Gen 3 motor right here. Gen 3 rods, stock bottom end, mint bore, stock pistons, stock rods, all new internals in it though. I like to refresh them with everything. All new seals, all new bearings, all new rings, new timing chain, new oil pump. And a very common thing with these higher mile motors is the oil pump seal on these. It's just an O-ring. That's one of the things that makes these things fail and lose oil pressure, was just a O-ring that goes on the oil pump. It's all apart. Kind of stupid to not put everything new and freshen it all up. It's absolutely beautiful. We checked all the specs of everything. Everything is within specs, like brand new. And we put a sheet metal fabricated intake on it. And speaking of the intake manifolds, everybody says, hey, I don't want to do an LS motor because they're so ugly. You can make them look like anything you want to make them look like. There's so many different variations. Holly makes a high-rise intake, so does Brian Tooley Racing. There is a billion different aftermarket manifolds. You can get a great big huge blower manifold with an intercooler in between it from 417 Motorsports. It's just a ton. Sean's Custom Alloy makes them super badass billet intakes and everything as well. You can change the look of them up. So let me take you across some of these. This is a Gen 3 truck. That's what it came on. Ugly ass intake. They're horribly ugly. But the factory did an awesome job on making them work well. They give really great low-end torque, good horsepower. Their upgrade to that, Gen 4 motors, this is considered a Trailblazer SS intake, and that is even more power, more torque, and everything you get out of these Gen 4 LS intakes from the trucks. But if you want to run a car intake on it, this is what would have came on a LS1. This is a LS6 intake right here, and I'll show you real quick on how you tell the difference. An LS6 intake is flat all the way across the bottom here. It is a W shape for the LS1 intake. So this is an LS6 intake. This is one of the best factory car intakes there is. Quite a bit substantially better than the LS2 that looks almost identical. The LS2's got a bigger throttle body for it. But this intake works better up to like 550, 600 horsepower. This would be your intake of choice for a car. Fits under low hood profile, but you run into problems with this. If you have a truck front drive accessories on it and a truck water pump, the throttle body hits on the water pump outlet. It also hits on the idler. ICT billet has an adapter. You can cut that off and move an idler down here, run a different belt, so you can get that. But you also have to run a car water pump then that has the outlet on a different spot than the truck does. So keep that in mind. Your LS swapping stuff, front drive accessories is really big. If you get by with your truck accessories, which stick out an inch and a half more than the Corvette one, 3/4 of an inch more than the F-body Camaro or GTO or Cadillac CTS-V, would all be in the mid-range. The trucks stick out the farthest, and then later versions of the Camaros, they all stuck them out this far. So Then they went the other way and they just went with the truck front drive spacing on everything. So there's a lot of switching around. That's one of your big concerns about doing an LS swap right here, is what front drive accessories are going to work for you. Truck stuff you can pick up really cheap, and the car stuff is a lot more harder to find. Corvette stuff, nearly impossible to find a used Corvette front drive accessory system, and if you do, you're going to pay $700 for it. So just thing to keep in mind. This is about a 420 horsepower motor. It has a 220 224 split. This has got a Morgan Motorsports cam in it, and no, this one's got a comp cam in it. 220 224 530 534 lift on it, so not a huge cam, but a great everyday driver cam. Got some good power still, some good torque, has great idle to it, doesn't have that big choppy lopey idle and everything. So this is a great, you know, everyday driver hot rod motor. About 400 horsepower get out of that on a motor dyno, and that is just a turnkey package like that, everything brand new. This one right here is going to go for about $5,500, and a turnkey running motor minus the wiring harness, because I don't know what people need for that, so what transmission you're going to run, blah blah blah. But this will be a turnkey package motor with motor mounts, intake, whole front drive accessories. $5,500 for this guy. And then we'll go on to our other motor over here on the other run stand. This is a Gen 4 motor, so easy to spot the difference between a Gen 3 and a Gen 4 motor is, for one, the Gen 3s have knock sensors in the intake valley. Even if the intake's on it, you can see that they have knock sensors underneath there. There's no provisions on the side of the block right here for the knock sensors in a Gen 3 motor. Now we go over to a Gen 4 motor like this. This has a knock sensor right here at the bottom of the block. So if you see that knock sensor, they're on both sides of the block. So the Gen 4s have the knock sensors down below, and that's how you can tell right away that it's a Gen 4 motor. Gen 4 motor will have better connecting rods and pistons, and most of the Gen 4s went to a flat top piston instead of the dished as well. So you get a little bump up in compression, plus you have better rods in a Gen 4 motor. Otherwise, they're the same. Everything can go mismatch back and forth. You can't put a Gen 3 valley cover on a Gen 4 motor because it has the little bosses for the DOD, and this particular plate right here blocks off the DOD AFM, and so AFM, active fuel management, drive on demand displacement, is the DOD. Same freaking thing. I don't know why they decided to call it two different things, but everybody gets it confused, going, well, what's the difference? There is no difference. It's the same thing. It's the deactivation of 4 cylinders. It turns it into a 4-cylinder motor, and it causes the demise of 80% of these motors, actually, because the cams fail, because of the lifters fail on the DOD lifters, and it takes the whole motor out of commission. So probably half of the motors that I have were all because of failed DOD. So I take that off of all the motors. No on-demand displacement, no need for that havoc to happen later on. We get rid of all of that stuff. This one's a Gen 4 all aluminum block. This is an LC9 motor, and the LC9 would have came in like a Trailblazer or something of that nature, and this one had flat top pistons on it, Gen 4 rods, and all aluminum block, absolute mint bore in it. I actually got this motor because it had a weep from, it was a factory defect, and the casting on it had a little weep on the block where the block was weeping. So it was easily, it's an aluminum block, very well versed at aluminum welding, so super easy for me to fix. I fixed the block and we got good to go. It is like brand new, inside, outside. I still put new bearings, new timing chain, new oil pump. All of that stuff is new. No, new oil pans, got a muscle car pan on it, so it'll fit in most swaps. This one I could sell with or without the carbureted intake, but just a long block, just to give you a base price, is about $4,000 just for the long block, minus the carburetor and all that. But everybody always is like, oh, these LS motors are so ugly. You can make them look like anything you want. You want to make it look old school, put a carburetor on it. What runs the computer then? Well, this is the only computer that it has right here. This tiny little box right here, this MSD box, that runs our ignition system for it, and it goes off your cam sensor and your crank sensor, so it utilizes both the cam and the crank sensor, and it converts that signal into an ignition firing signal. So that's how that works. You still have to jet your carburetor how you would to make it rich or lean. You can adjust the timing curve by little pill chips that you put inside of that little ignition box to change the timing curve. You can also, optional, but you can run it off of a map sensor. That map sensor right here would take the manifold vacuum and convert that into a signal, and so it can adjust your air fuel ratio and everything, or your spark advance from that ignition box. But you don't have to run a map sensor on it. Just makes it more accurate way of metering it. So you can run a carbureted intake like this. They also make them, and this is kind of like that. You can see where these bosses right here are. This is where the other, you can order it machined already, so it would have a hole in it right here for your fuel injectors, and then you would run a fuel rail. So now you could still control it off the factory ECU, and then you would run a 4-barrel throttle body that just controls the airflow. The injectors would inject the fuel right straight into the valves, so you could still have this old school look to it like this, but now you could still have electronic fuel injection. You can have all the benefits of the LS, controlling timing, the ignition, the spark, the fuel. You can have it control all that, plus the transmission and everything as well. You can have it and still make it look old school like this too, which is pretty darn cool in my book. You know, a lot of people really like that classic look, and I do too. But I'm all about fuel injection and everything. You saw how we started this motor up. It doesn't have a choke hooked up to it at all, so it's really temperamental, and you have to start it, pump the gas, let it idle for a little bit before you can let off the gas before it finally warms up. Okay, if you get a properly set up carburetor, it'll do that exact same thing as a fuel injection system does. And most of the time when they dyno them back to back, somehow, I don't know why, but a carburetor actually makes a little bit more power, but it's so little bit that you don't even notice it. Really, you'd never feel it, for one. But I love it when you hit the gas, you hit the key, and it just boom, with fuel injection, it just fires right up. It idles, it automatically controls everything. You throw it in gear, you go. It doesn't die, it doesn't hesitate. That's the beauty of the fuel injection and the computer controlled stuff. But if you want to do it old school way, you can do this a heck of a lot cheaper. I shouldn't say a heck of a lot. You can do it cheaper, but it's not a whole lot, because you got to buy the manifold, you got to buy the carburetor, you have to buy the fuel pump, you have to buy the fuel pressure regulator, you have to buy your MSD box and everything too. So to run it on a carburetor, it's still going to cost you $1,500 with buying everything separate like that. So you can do it with the factory intake manifold. So if you get a truck motor, it's going to have an ugly intake manifold like that, and you can run it like that, or you can change the look of it completely and change it with any other intake. But it goes along with that snowball effect. It could be your water pump, it could be your front drive accessories. You would be changing all that if you decide to go like with a car intake or something. So keep that in mind. And keep in mind, people, the biggest thing that I can tell people before you jump into an LS swap: research your vehicle for your particular car. You can find out what oil pan fits, what front drive accessories fit, what intake fits under your hood, And if you do all that, you could be looking for a motor, say out of a newer Camaro would be a better choice than finding a truck motor that came cheaper, but you couldn't use the intake manifold, you can't use the front drive accessories, you can't use the oil pump or the oil pan and everything as well. And now what did you buy? You just bought a long block, and you could have bought a brand new one cheaper than what you just did. So do your research, do a little bit of homework, do some diligence on this, and you can get swapping into an LS motor for a lot less than what you would think if you're going after the right parts and pieces to begin with. So stick around, we're going to take you for a ride in that truck here next. We're going to throw that thing on the dyno and see what that thing can do. Don't forget to like this video. Click like, throw me a comment, let me know what you think. Ring the bell for those notifications when we get a new video. We got lots more coming up, guys. A lot of cool stuff coming up. I hope you guys are enjoying the ride.